I've been daily driving my M1 MacBook Air for a year now, but with all this video editing I'm doing, I think I'm due for an upgrade. I should really check for gas leaks. And to add insult to injury, my MacBook Air M1 has like 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage, and this just has half of it. But we like to have stupid fun on this channel, so today I'm gonna see if the $500 MacBook Neo can replace my MacBook Air M1. I gotta be honest here, it's pretty fun opening this, because I pretty much buy all of my electronics used. Presentation here is pretty cool. We got the laptop wrapped in paper and with a tab that just says hello. And I don't know about you, but the colors they offer this laptop in are so cool, especially the blue. I mean, just look at this. We also got an instruction manual nobody's gonna read. We've got a USB-C to USB-C and a power adapter, which is kind of surprising for today's day and age. That's kind of funny. The power brick is 20 watts even though this thing can charge at 30. Well, I guess that's it for the box. Let's take a look at the laptop itself. Oh cool, I didn't know they made the screens out of denim now. Comparing the two, at least based on build quality, you can just immediately tell the MacBook Neo is cheaper. But hold on, I'm not saying the Neo is like cheaply made or it'll like fall apart in your backpack. It's still fine, just not as premium as the MacBook Air, which, come on, what were you expecting? And this isn't that big of a difference, but I'm a big fan of how they made the MacBook Air's like 13-inch screen into a smaller form factor in the Neo. We even have full-size function keys now. Now there's one more thing I want to cover before we go into the software and set this thing up. There's no backlit keyboard. Now my first impression of this is that Apple had to cut corners somewhere, you know? But at the same time, my second impression is, do you need it? Because one, you're gonna have the screen lighting the keyboard when you're using it, and two, I'm sorry about this one, but if you need to see the keys to type, that's just a skill issue, okay? Just get good. Anyways, let's set this thing up. Transfer your data to this Mac, set up with iPhone or iPad. You know what, I'm actually curious, what data is gonna transfer over if we set it up with an iPad? Looking for nearby devices. What? Look harder. Surprisingly, the iPad ended up not working, even though it was on the latest software version for that product, but I'll just use my iPhone XR then. As I'm clicking around setup, I'm starting to notice this trackpad, it's real. The one on the MacBook Air, it's just like a sheet of glass that pretends you're clicking it. This one, it like actually recesses. And at first, honestly, it's kind of jarring, but the more I use it, the more I'm starting to like it over the Air's trackpad. At this point, I'm just glazing it, but the keyboard, it feels like it has more of a punch compared to the Air as well. I'm really liking the build quality on this thing. Make this your new Mac. Here's everything set up as you had it on your iPad. What? Sure, f it, whatever, who cares? Hey, look, it's the thing Apple's being sued for. Yeah, the Gemini thing, it'll be useful in, I don't know, like a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever they add it. And seems like that's it for setup. The first thing we should do here is head to settings and update the system. Let's quickly do 26.3.2. After the update, we can judge the performance of the OS, and obviously, cause it's Apple Silicon, everything just flies here. So let's start to push the Mac by doing my daily workflow on this thing. First, we're gonna download Brave, and we're just gonna spam this with a bunch of intensive tabs to see how it handles it on 8 gigs of RAM. Now, I've heard people say online that the MacBook Neo's speakers sound worse than the MacBook Air M1s, but honestly, I can't really tell the difference. I mean, obviously the speakers are going to be better on the M1 Air compared to the Neo just because of the size of them, but like I said before, I just can't tell the difference. Anyways, I opened 24 tabs of the same YouTube video playing at the same time, so how's the RAM holding up? We're pretty close to hitting the limit. We're at 7.1 gigs with 3 gigs of swap used. So what happens if we just pop open a bunch of apps now? Yeah, see, it's starting to slow down. It's been 30 seconds and music still hasn't launched. Come on, any second now. There we go. Yeah, here's where the worst part of the laptop starts to show itself, the SSD and the RAM situation. Now, 8 gigs of RAM in 2026 is pushing it, but then you add the SSD in this thing, which is twice as slow as the one inside the M1 Air, and it's just not a good experience when you're doing a bunch at once, especially when you're relying on swap with that slower SSD. You saw what happened there with the apps opening, right? Now, 24 YouTube tabs at once isn't really reasonable for a day-to-day use case, but just keep this benchmark in mind if you're going to try to do more intensive stuff on this MacBook. And even with the apps opening slower than usual, multitasking between them was still pretty snappy, so it's not that bad. But you know what probably is bad? Gaming on this thing. I really wonder how far we can push Roblox. Now, I'm only trying to connect a mouse with this, so it doesn't really matter, but beware the USB 2 port on this thing. If you want to do display out or use an SSD at a fast speed, you're going to want to take this port right here. And if you mistake them, because there's no indication on the laptop itself, macOS will tell you what's right. Oh, by the way, if you're going to game on macOS, just turn this off. Now, Roblox in the Mac settings has no problem maintaining 60 FPS on the MacBook Neo, but we're having kind of like a different issue. I think it might be game specific, but we're having like a black flicker on the screen every other second. Kind of annoying. Just to isolate the issue, I'm playing a more intensive game, Redwood Prison Reworked, and yep, the black flickers still happens, so Roblox, you guys gotta update this for the MacBook Neo. Maybe it's something to do with the Neo's display, because when docked to an external monitor, the issue disappears completely. Oh, and if you want to game at high FPS, you're gonna have to tone the graphics settings down, because the max settings here, uncapped at 120, we're averaging around like 80. And even with all that load, the MacBook seems to not be getting that warm, which is pretty impressive. Next, let's take a look at Minecraft. Oh, and by the way, if you want to play Minecraft on Apple Silicon, I highly recommend installing Vulkan mod because the performance on native OpenGL just kinda sucks. The Minecraft team says they have planned to add it soon, but you know, it's on their schedule, so expect it in a year. We're gonna try this out by maxing out every single setting. This is insanely impressive for this hardware, but we're playing Minecraft on max settings and having absolutely zero stutter, stable 60 FPS. Let's bump up the frame rate then and dock it to an external monitor. Just like Roblox, when the frame rate gets uncapped at a high graphics setting, the game starts to struggle. So if you tone down those graphics settings back to normal, this is a pretty good way to play high frame rate Minecraft. Next, we're going to try to play Counter-Strike 2 on this thing with crossover, and I'm kind of impressed by the download speed on this thing. I mean, these are the speeds I'd be getting on my Windows PC with Ethernet. Now, when playing games through crossover, you're going to lose a bunch of performance just because of the translation, so we're going to be playing CS2 at 720p on all low settings. Uh-oh. And yeah, no, CS2 on the MacBook Neo at 720p, just completely unplayable. We're getting 1 FPS. I think we'd be better off trying out CSGO instead, especially because it's actually got a native Mac version. For this game, we're going to be playing it at the native res in all medium settings. When playing CSGO on those settings, we're averaging around, I'd say, 30 to 40 frames a second, which, it's not that smooth, but what if we bump it down to 1080p instead? Alright, this is a bit better. We're at around 45 FPS on average. So when it comes to gaming on this thing, it really just boils down to how much the developer cares to optimize it. As you saw with Roblox and Minecraft, the potential is really high for this thing, but just playing like unoptimized games like CS2 and CSGO, it's not that good of an experience. The next thing that's a part of my workflow that I want to try and do on this is video editing. And to test it, why don't we edit the video about the MacBook Neo on the MacBook Neo? First thing I'm going to do is move all of our clips over to the MacBook with AirDrop. Now when it comes to AirDrop and the other Apple features, they're pretty convenient, but you're going to want to use something like Local Send if you want to save the files to an external drive instead, because you can only save with AirDrop to the internal drive, which I find really stupid. And speaking of the SSD size situation on this thing, get ready for a massive cope, but you can use a USB 3 SSD and I guess command strip it to the back of the laptop to make it portable. Now the USB 3.0 port on this thing is even slower than the internal drive, maxing out at around 500 to 600 megabytes a second. But if you need more storage, it is there. Now that the transfer's done, let's pop open Final Cut Pro. Now we go into Finder, grab all of our video files, pop them into the timeline, and oh yeah, pretty much instant. Even on my M1 Air, it takes like a good 10 seconds to load, but here it's just instant. I'm gonna be honest, most of the time I have to edit, I end up just playing with this for 20 minutes. But just like pretty much everything else on the Neo, Final Cut Pro flies on this. You can jump to any segment in the 4K 60 timeline and it's just instant. Now let's test out the rendering and see how long it takes to export 4K 60 footage in the H.264 format. See you in a bit. And the full amount of time to render the video on battery life is 48 minutes, but how does it compare to the M1 Air? And the M1 Air is 7 minutes faster than the Neo, but keep in mind the SSD speeds are twice as fast, so still pretty impressive on the Neo's end. Now that we've fully used and compared the two laptops, I think it's a good time to answer the question, is it worth it? If battery life is your #1 concern, I'm gonna have to go with the MacBook Neo. It's just because the thing's newer, you know? If you get like an M1 Air used, it's gonna be like an 85, like maybe even 70%. The one I got right here, I think it's like on 82. But if you're okay with the battery life being a tiny bit worse, honestly, it's hands down better to go with the M1 Air. With the education discount and sales tax, I paid $530 for the MacBook Neo, and this thing, you could find it on eBay refurbished for $350. They pretty much do the exact same thing, and you have better I/O on the MacBook Air, you have a faster SSD. I don't really think it makes sense to buy a MacBook Neo when this is on sale for the price it is. Now, aside from the tiny bit more battery life, just because it's new, I think the MacBook Neo is going to excel when it comes to software support, because the M1 Air is from 2020, and this thing, it came out like, what, 3 days ago? And here's where it gets really confusing to what Apple's going to do in the future, because these things, they're pretty much similarly spec'd, so who knows? Are they going to drop this thing in 2 years, and this thing's going to get 7 years of support? Will they both be dropped in 5 years? Who knows? Now, even though I don't think the MacBook Neo is like the value king when it comes to Apple Silicon, I still find it a really interesting device, especially because of the iPhone SoC inside of it. I'm filming this in the iPhone 17 Pro with the A19 Pro chipset, but, you know, I can't run like Final Cut Pro on my iPhone, I can't run Pixelmator, so it really just feels like an artificial limitation, especially not being able to use like display out on my iPhone. I mean, the iPhone Pro's even got like a better cooling solution compared to this thing. It's got a vapor chamber, come on. Apple would never do it, but could you imagine an iPhone with proper display output support to like a different OS? Like, if Mac OS would be one thing, it would pretty much destroy every budget laptop out there, but even like the iPad OS GIMP display output where you can only run like the iOS apps, that would still be killer. And come to think of it, Google and Android, they're doing like that Chrome OS merger where it's gonna run on Android phones natively now, so if that's a big enough hit, we might actually see like an iPad OS or Mac OS display output on an iPhone. So to summarize, Chromebooks, they've just been delegated to coaster status. Even though I think the M1 Air is the better value out of the two, there's really no excuse not to go with Apple Silicon anymore, you know? $350 for an ARM laptop, way more powerful than pretty much anything else in that price range. If you don't buy a budget Apple Silicon laptop, I'm sorry, but you just hate yourself. What are you doing? Yeah, hold up before you say, oh, I need Windows. My professor says I need Windows. Just virtualize it on Mac OS, alright? It's not that hard. Download like Parallels, or I think if you need something for free, you got VMware Fusion. I use it myself for like my Microsoft project assignments. It works fine. And look, I can't lie, I like Apple products, alright? But there's nothing else like it, okay? Even if you hate Apple, you gotta admit, these are just best in class. Anyways, thanks for watching me review and use the MacBook Neo. I really like this device, but if you want to see me use anything else, let me know down in the comments. Alright, I'll see you later.